Attorney General Bondi, in September 2013, the Donald J. Trump Foundation donated $25,000 to your Political Action Committee. Is that correct? Jasmine Crockett's voice was calm, almost friendly. Pam Bondi sat across from her in the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing room, perfectly composed in a navy suit, her blonde hair styled for the cameras. Yes, Congresswoman, that's a matter of public record. And at that time, your office, the Florida Attorney General's office, had received numerous complaints about Trump University, hundreds of them, actually. Is that also correct? Bondi's smile didn't waver. My office received complaints about many entities. We received thousands of complaints every year. But you remember the Trump University complaints specifically? I remember that there were complaints. Yes. Crockett nodded slowly, opening a folder. So when you accepted that $25,000 donation from Mr. Trump's foundation, you knew your office was looking into fraud complaints against his company? No. Bondi's voice was firm, practiced. I was not aware of any active investigation into Trump University at the time I accepted that donation. You weren't aware. That's correct. Even though you were the Attorney General, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of Florida, and your office was investigating one of the largest fraud cases in the state. I wasn't personally involved in every case that came through my office. We had staff who handled the. We'll get to your staff in a moment. Crockett pulled out a document. Let me walk you through a timeline with you. March 2013, your Consumer Protection Division receives complaints about Trump University. Do you recall that? As I said, we received many complaints. I'm asking about these specific complaints. Your office logged them. Your staff opened a case file March 2013. Yes or no? Bondi hesitated. If the records show that, then yes, they do show that. April 2013. Your Consumer Protection Division began investigating whether Trump University violated Florida's Deceptive and Unfair Trade Practices Act. Your office subpoenaed documents. Do you remember that? I don't recall the specific date, but it happened. Your office was actively investigating Trump University in April 2013. Correct? If the records indicate that, then I'm sure it's accurate. September 2013, Donald Trump's foundation donates $25,000 to your PAC. And Justice for All. You remember that donation? Yes, I remember the donation. And October 2013, your office closes the Trump University investigation. No charges filed, no penalties, nothing. The investigation just stops. Do you remember that? Bondi's jaw tightened slightly. I don't recall the specific date that investigation concluded, but it did conclude without any action taken. Not every investigation results in prosecution. Congresswoman, let me make sure I have this timeline right. Crockett held up her hand, ticking off fingers. March, complaints come in. April, investigation opens. September, you get $25,000 from Trump. October, investigation closes. Does that sound accurate? Again, I wasn't personally involved in. You were the Attorney General. You're telling me you didn't know about a major fraud investigation in your own office. I'm saying I didn't know about it when I accepted the donation. When did you find out about it? Bondi paused. The pause stretched out. Someone in the gallery coughed. I don't recall the exact date I became aware of the investigation. Before or after the donation? I'm not certain. You're not certain if you knew your office was investigating someone before you took $25,000 from them. It's been over a decade, Congresswoman. I don't remember every detail. It's $25,000. That's not a small amount. Surely you remember the circumstances around accepting that much money. Bondi's hands gripped the edge of the table. As I've explained, I was not aware of any investigation at the time of the donation. Crockett pulled out another document. This is an email from your Chief of Staff to you. Dated August 15, 2013, 2 weeks before the Trump donation. Subject. Line: Trump University Investigation Update. Would you like me to read it? The color drained from Bondi's face. The room was silent except for the scratching of pens as reporters took notes. Chairman Durbin cleared his throat but said nothing. Crockett read from the email, quote, "We've received additional complaints about Trump University. Consumer Protection recommends we move forward with formal action. This could be a significant case. Please advise on how you'd like to proceed." End quote. This was sent to your official email address 2 weeks before you accepted Trump's donation. Do you remember receiving this? I receive hundreds of emails a day. I don't recall every. You responded to this email August 16th, the next day. Should I read your response? Bondi looked like she wanted to sink through the floor. I don't believe that's necessary. But, quote, "Let's discuss this in person. Don't move forward until we talk." You wrote that to your chief of staff about the Trump University investigation 2 weeks before taking Trump's money. I may have wanted to understand the details before making a decision. And then 2 weeks later, Trump's foundation donates $25,000 to your political action committee. And then 1 month after that, the investigation is closed. No charges, no penalties, nothing. Crockett looked up from the paper. Attorney General Bondi, I'm trying very hard to understand how this isn't quid pro quo. It wasn't quid pro quo. The investigation was closed because we didn't have sufficient evidence to proceed. Your Consumer Protection Division disagreed. They recommended formal action. Recommendations don't always lead to prosecution. They do when there's actual fraud. They don't when the person being investigated donates to your campaign. Crockett leaned forward. Let me ask you something simple. After you closed that investigation, did you attend Donald Trump's wedding? Bondi blinked at the sudden shift. Yes, I attended his wedding in 2014, a few months after closing the investigation into his company. It wasn't connected. You investigated him, took his money, dropped the investigation, and then went to his wedding. And you're telling this committee that's all just coincidence? Donald Trump and I had a professional relationship. Professional. That's one word for it. Someone in the gallery laughed, quickly stifled. Did other people you investigated also invite you to their weddings? I don't see how that's relevant. I'll tell you how it's relevant. It creates an appearance of impropriety. It suggests that justice in Florida was for sale to the highest bidder, and the highest bidder was Donald Trump. Bondi's voice rose. That is absolutely not true. I have always conducted myself with integrity. Then explain the timeline. Explain the email. Explain the donation. Explain the closed investigation. Explain the wedding invitation. Explain all of it in a way that doesn't sound like you sold your office. I didn't sell my office. Then what did you do? The question hung in the air. Bondi opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I made a decision based on the evidence available to me at the time. The evidence that your own staff said was sufficient to move forward. I disagreed with their assessment. 2 weeks after receiving $25,000 from the target of the investigation. The donation didn't influence my decision. Then what did? What evidence did you see in those 2 weeks that your Consumer Protection Division missed? What changed between your chief of staff recommending action and you closing the investigation? Bondi was silent. I'm waiting, Attorney General Bondi. What changed? Bondi took a sip of water. Her hand trembled slightly. When she spoke, her voice was more controlled. Congresswoman, I understand you're trying to create a narrative here, but the fact is no laws were broken. The donation was properly reported. It went through the appropriate channels. There was nothing illegal about it. I didn't ask if it was legal. I asked if it was right. The two things are not mutually exclusive, are they? You're nominated to be the United States Attorney General, the chief law enforcement officer of this country, and you're sitting here telling us that as long as something is technically legal, it doesn't matter if it's corrupt. I'm not saying that. Then what are you saying? Because it sounds like you're saying you can accept money from someone under investigation, close that investigation, and as long as you filed the right paperwork, everything's fine. I'm saying that I followed the law. You followed the letter of the law while violating its spirit. That's what prosecutors call creative compliance. It's what criminals do when they're trying to stay out of jail. Bondi's face flushed. I am not a criminal, Congresswoman. No, you're the person who decided not to prosecute criminals as long as they donated to your campaign. Crockett flipped to another page. Let's talk about some of your other investigations that mysteriously disappeared. I object to the characterization. In 2014, your office received complaints about Corinthian Colleges, a for-profit college chain accused of defrauding students. Do you remember that? Bondi's eyes narrowed. Vaguely. Your Consumer Protection Division again recommended formal action, but you attended a fundraiser at Mar-a-Lago hosted by someone who did business with Corinthian. And then mysteriously that investigation also went nowhere. Do you remember that? I don't recall the specific details. You don't recall. That seems to be a pattern with you. You don't recall the Trump investigation. You don't recall the Corinthian investigation. What do you recall, Attorney General Bondi? I recall pursuing justice for the people of Florida. Justice for some people, the ones who couldn't afford to donate to your campaign. Crockett pulled out more papers. Let me tell you what else I found. Between 2011 and 2019, you attended at least 12 fundraisers at Trump Properties, Mar-a-Lago, Trump Tower, his golf clubs. You raised hundreds of thousands of dollars from people who had business before your office. And during that same time period, multiple investigations into wealthy defendants mysteriously stalled or disappeared. That's a correlation, not causation. Let's test that theory. 2015, your office received complaints about a timeshare company accused of defrauding elderly customers. The CEO of that company donated $15,000 to your PAC 3 months into your investigation. What happened to that case? Bondi was silent. It was dropped 6 weeks after the donation. No charges filed. Crockett flipped a page. 2016, a pharmaceutical company was under investigation for price gouging. Their lobbyist, who later hired you at Ballard Partners, hosted a fundraiser for you. The investigation stalled, never went anywhere. I can't speak to every case. I'm not asking about every case. I'm asking about the cases where donations preceded decisions, because there's a clear pattern here. Money comes in, investigations go away. It happened with Trump. It happened with Corinthian. It happened with the timeshare company. It happened with the pharmaceutical company. How many times does it have to happen before we call it what it is? And what is that, Congresswoman? Corruption. Legalized corruption. You found the loophole. You took the money. You filed the paperwork. And then you made prosecutorial decisions that just happened to benefit your donors. It's technically legal, but it's absolutely corrupt. Bondi's face was flushed. I made every decision based on the merits of the case. The merits and the money. Let's be honest about what we're talking about. Crockett pulled out a chart. I had my staff put together a comparison. On one side, we have investigations into companies or individuals who donated to your campaigns. On the other side, investigations into those who didn't. Want to guess which group was more likely to face prosecution? This is ridiculous. The numbers aren't ridiculous, they're damning. Of 43 significant investigations into entities that donated to your campaigns, only 4 resulted in any penalty whatsoever. That's less than 10%. Of 67 investigations into entities that didn't donate, 49 resulted in prosecution or settlement. That's over 70%. Explain that difference. Different cases have different evidence. They have different donors. That's the difference. Crockett leaned forward. And here's what makes it even worse. While you were going easy on white-collar criminals who donated to you, you were crushing everyone else. You spent enormous resources prosecuting low-level drug offenses. You fought against criminal justice reform. You opposed early release for nonviolent offenders. You were a law and order hardliner for poor people, but for rich donors, suddenly you believed in second chances. I enforced the law equally. Let's look at that. Between 2011 and 2019, your office prosecuted over 15,000 people for drug possession. Mostly marijuana, Mostly poor people, mostly people of color. How many wealthy white-collar criminals did you prosecute in that same period? Bondi was silent. I'll help you. 47, out of hundreds of investigations. You prosecuted 47 white-collar criminals in 8 years, but 15,000 drug users. Does that seem like equal justice to you? Drug enforcement was a priority. For certain people. Poor people, black people, brown people. But rich people, donors, friends of Donald Trump, for them, justice was negotiable. For them, a campaign donation could make problems disappear. Crockett's voice was sharp. Now you want to know what really bothers me about this? It's not just that you went easy on your donors. It's that you went hard on everyone else to cover for it. You built a reputation as tough on crime by prosecuting people who couldn't fight back. Meanwhile, the real criminals, the ones defrauding thousands of people, stealing millions of dollars, they got away because they knew how to make a donation. You're oversimplifying complex prosecutorial decisions. I'm reading your record, your own numbers, your own decisions. And what they show is someone who used the power of the Attorney General's office to reward friends and punish enemies, to protect the powerful and prosecute the vulnerable, to serve yourself, not the people of Florida. Bondi's hands were shaking now. I served the people of Florida for 8 years. You served your donors. Let me give you one more example because this one really captures who you are as a prosecutor. 2014, a mother in Tampa was arrested for using medical marijuana to treat her daughter's seizures. Her daughter had epilepsy, severe debilitating seizures. The marijuana was the only thing that helped. You personally opposed Amendment 2, which would have made that legal. You said medical marijuana would harm Florida families. Do you remember that? Bondi's voice was quiet. I had policy concerns about the amendment. You opposed medicine for sick children. You fought it. You spent state resources campaigning against it. And when that mother was arrested, your office prosecuted her. She faced 5 years in prison for trying to help her dying daughter. Do you remember what happened to her case? Silence. She took a plea deal because she couldn't afford to fight your office. She had to admit to a crime just to stay out of prison so she could take care of her daughter. That's who you prosecuted with the full force of your office. Desperate mothers, sick children, people with nowhere else to turn. Crockett's eyes were blazing now. But Donald Trump, someone who defrauded thousands of people? He donated $25,000 and you dropped the case. That's your record. That's your legacy. Harsh on the helpless, lenient on the rich. That is a gross mischaracterization. It's your own numbers, your own cases, your own decisions. You can't run from them just because they look bad. Bondi tried to regroup. Congresswoman, I think you're overlooking the many cases my office successfully prosecuted. Oh, I'm not overlooking them at all. Let's talk about who you did prosecute. Crockett's voice turned cold. You spent enormous resources going after people for marijuana possession. You fought tooth and nail to prevent medical marijuana in Florida, even for terminally ill patients. You personally opposed Amendment 2, which would have allowed medical marijuana for children with epilepsy. Do you remember that? I had concerns about the amendment's language. You said allowing sick children to have medicine would harm Florida families. Those were your words. You fought against medicine for dying children, but you couldn't find the resources to prosecute Donald Trump for defrauding thousands of people. Those are two completely different issues. They're both about priorities, about who deserves justice and who doesn't. And your priorities were very clear. Harsh on the powerless, lenient on the powerful. Crockett paused. But let's talk about what you did after you left office because that's when it gets really interesting. Bondi shifted uncomfortably in her seat. January 2019, you leave the Florida Attorney General's office. February 2019, you joined Ballard Partners as a lobbyist. March 2019, you also register as a foreign agent lobbying for the government of Qatar. And around that same time, you start appearing on Fox News defending Donald Trump. Is that timeline accurate? I pursued several professional opportunities after leaving office. Professional opportunities. Let's talk about those Fox News appearances. Were you being paid? I was a contributor. Yes. Paid by Fox News? Yes. And you were also being paid by Ballard Partners? Yes. And you were being paid by the Qatari government as a registered foreign agent? Yes. That's a matter of public record. So you were collecting 3 paychecks while defending Donald Trump on television. Were you also being paid by Trump? Bondi's eyes widened slightly. I wasn't directly employed by, but you were working for his legal defense fund. You were part of his impeachment defense team. Were you compensated for that work? There were expenses covered. How much? I don't see how that's relevant. You were on TV claiming to be an independent legal analyst while you were literally on Donald Trump's payroll. How is that not relevant? The room buzzed with murmurs. Someone in the gallery said, "Wow!" loud enough to be heard. Bondi's voice rose. I disclosed all of my professional relationships. To who? Not to the Fox News viewers who thought you were an independent voice. They didn't know you were being paid by Trump while defending him. That's not analysis, Attorney General Bondi. That's advertising. I was offering my legal expertise. You were offering propaganda, and you were being paid for it by the same man who'd paid you as Attorney General, the same man whose investigation you dropped, the same man whose wedding you attended, the same man who's now nominated you for this position. Crockett leaned forward. Do you see the pattern here? You've been on Donald Trump's payroll in one form or another for over a decade, either directly or indirectly. Either as a donation recipient or as a paid defender. You've never been independent of him. Why would that change now? I am my own person. Are you? Let's look at what you said while you were being paid to defend him. During the first impeachment, you went on Fox News and said the whistleblower should be revealed. You said the impeachment was a sham and a witch hunt. You attacked the witnesses. You questioned their patriotism. Do you remember saying those things? I was offering legal commentary. You were doing PR work. You were being paid to defend him, and that's what you did, just like you were paid in 2013 and you dropped his investigation. The only difference is the job title. The function was the same. Trump pays you. You protect Trump. Bondi's face was red. Now that is completely unfair. Is it? Let me ask you this. During all those Fox News appearances, during all that time you spent defending Trump, did you ever even once criticize him? Did you ever say he was wrong about anything? Silence. Not once. In hundreds of TV appearances, you never broke from his position, never questioned his actions, never suggested he might be wrong. That's not legal analysis. That's loyalty. The kind of loyalty you've shown for over a decade. The kind of loyalty that gets rewarded with nominations like this one. I was defending the Constitution. You were defending Donald Trump, and you were being paid to do it by him while claiming to be independent. Crockett pulled out more papers. And here's what makes it even more problematic. While you were on TV defending Trump, you were also lobbying for Ballard Partners. Do you know who some of Ballard Partners' clients were during that time? Bondi's jaw clenched. I followed all lobbying disclosure requirements. That's not what I asked? I asked who the clients were. Let me help you. Amazon, AT&T, major corporations with significant interests in federal policy. You were lobbying for them while defending the president on TV. Were those clients aware that you had a relationship with Trump, that you were part of his defense team, that you might have access to the White House? My lobbying work and my TV appearances were separate. Were they? Because it looks like you were selling access. Hire me as a lobbyist, and I'll get you in the room with my friend, the president. That's what it looks like. I never promised access. You didn't have to promise. Your resume did it for you. Former Florida AG who dropped Trump's investigation, paid member of his impeachment defense team, regular Fox News defender. That resume says, I'm loyal to Trump. Louder than any promise could, and companies paid millions for that loyalty. Bondi was breathing hard now. You're making assumptions. I'm reading between the lines, which isn't hard because the lines are very close together. Crockett's voice was cold. You've spent over a decade building a career around one thing: loyalty to Donald Trump. You protected him as AG. You defended him on TV. You lobbied on his behalf. And now you want to be Attorney General of the United States. The same position that might have to investigate him, prosecute him, hold him accountable. Why would anyone believe you do that when you've spent 11 years proving you won't? And then what did you do? The question caught Bondi off guard. What? After you left office in 2019, what did you do next? I returned to private practice. You became a lobbyist. Specifically, you joined Ballard Partners, one of the biggest lobbying firms in Florida. Is that correct? I did government relations work. Yes. Lobbying. You became a lobbyist for the same industries you'd regulated as Attorney General, the same companies that had appeared before your office. You took everything you'd learned as AG and sold it to the highest bidder. That's not. How much did you make in your first year as a lobbyist? Bondi's jaw clenched. I don't see how that's relevant. How much? My finances are my own business. You're asking to be confirmed as United States Attorney General. Your finances are very much our business. How much did you make? Over $1 million in 1 year. After 8 years as Attorney General making what? $130,000 a year, you went from public servant to millionaire in 12 months. How did you do that? I had expertise that was valuable. You had connections. You had relationships. You had inside knowledge of how the Florida AG's office worked because you'd run it. And you sold all of that to corporations who wanted to know how to avoid prosecution. You turned your public service into private profit. There's everything wrong with it. You used your position as Attorney General as an audition for a lobbying job. You went easy on companies that might hire you later. You built relationships with donors who could pay you when you left office. You turned the AG's office into a networking opportunity. That is absolutely not true. Then why did Ballard Partners hire you? What expertise did you have except your connections from being AG? What were they paying for if not your ability to influence your former office? Bondi's voice rose. I had years of legal experience. Doing what? Name one major case you personally prosecuted as Attorney General. One significant trial where you stood in front of a jury and argued for justice. Silence. You can't, can you? Because you didn't try cases. You held press conferences. You went on TV. You attended fundraisers. You built a political brand. And then you cashed out. That's not a legal career, Attorney General Bondi. That's a con. The room was completely silent now. Every reporter was typing. Every senator was watching. Bondi looked like she'd been physically struck. She tried to steady her voice. Congresswoman, I understand you have political objections to my nomination. This isn't about politics. This is about integrity. About whether someone who sold justice in Florida can be trusted with justice for the entire country. I never sold justice. You took $25,000 from someone under investigation and dropped the case. What do you call that? A campaign donation and an unrelated prosecutorial decision. Made 2 weeks apart by the same person who attended his wedding and then became his lobbyist, and then defended him on TV and now wants to be his Attorney General. At what point does it stop being coincidence and start being corruption? Bondi's face was red. Now I am not corrupt. Then what are you? Because you're not qualified. You barely prosecuted any cases. You specialized in going after powerless people while protecting the powerful. You turned your office into a fundraising operation and then cashed out as a lobbyist. Your main qualification for this job seems to be that you're loyal to Donald Trump. Is that fair to say? I'm qualified because I have 8 years of experience as a state attorney general. Doing what specifically? What did you do as AG that qualifies you to run the Department of Justice? I managed an office of hundreds of people. Managing isn't prosecuting. What legal philosophy guides your work? What principles drive your decisions about justice? Bondi opened her mouth. Nothing came out. You don't have one, do you? You don't have a philosophy. You have politics. You have loyalty. You have relationships, but you don't have principles. That's not true. Then tell me your principles right now. What do you believe about justice? Bondi's voice was strained. I believe in the rule of law. The rule of law that allowed you to take money from someone under investigation? I believe in equal treatment. For some people, not for Donald Trump, not for your donors. I believe in. Bondi stopped. Her hands gripped the table. You don't know, do you? You don't actually have principles about justice. You have talking points. You have focus grouped answers, but you don't have real beliefs about what justice means. Crockett leaned back in her chair. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, almost sad. Let me ask you something, Attorney General Bondi. Why do you want this job? Bondi blinked at the sudden change in tone. Because I believe I can serve the American people. That's not what I asked? I asked why you want it. Really want it. Not the talking point, the truth. I've spent my career in law enforcement. You spent 8 years as AG, then immediately became a lobbyist. You didn't care about law enforcement then, you cared about money. So why now? Why come back? Bondi shifted in her seat. Because President Trump asked me to serve. There it is. Crockett's voice was sharp again. Because Trump asked you. Not because you want to serve justice. Not because you have a vision for the Department of Justice. Not because you care about equal treatment under the law. Because Donald Trump asked you, and you've never said no to him, have you? I'm my own person. Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, you've been working for Donald Trump since 2013. You took his money. You dropped his investigation. You went to his wedding. You defended him on TV. You lobbied for his interests. You stood by him through 2 impeachments. You've done everything he's ever asked you to do. Why would that change now? I am an independent law enforcement officer. Let me ask you directly then. If Donald Trump, as president, commits a federal crime, will you prosecute him? The question landed like a bomb. The room went completely silent. Bondi stared at Crockett. That's a hypothetical. It's not a hypothetical. It's the job. The Attorney General's job is to enforce federal law against anyone who breaks it, including the president. Will you do that? I would review any evidence and make a determination based on the facts and the law. That's not what I asked. I asked if you will prosecute the president if he commits a crime. Yes or no? It would depend on the specific circumstances. No, it wouldn't. Either you'll prosecute crimes or you won't. Which is it? Bondi's face cycled through expressions: panic, calculation, defiance. I would follow the law wherever it leads. Including to the Oval Office? I'm not going to speculate about hypothetical scenarios. This isn't speculation. This is the core function of your job. The Attorney General has to be willing to prosecute anyone who breaks federal law, even the president who appointed them. Are you willing to do that? I would make decisions based on evidence. You can't say yes, can you? Bondi was silent. You literally cannot say that you would prosecute Donald Trump if he committed a crime, because if you say yes, he'll withdraw your nomination. And if you say no, you're admitting you shouldn't be confirmed. So you're stuck, trapped by your own loyalty. I am not trapped. Then answer the question, will you prosecute Donald Trump if he breaks the law? The silence stretched out. 5 seconds. 10. 15. Someone in the gallery whispered. A reporter's laptop hummed. Bondi's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. I would treat every case fairly. And you can't say it. You actually cannot say the words. I will prosecute Donald Trump if he commits a crime. Because you won't. We all know you won't. You've spent 11 years proving you won't. You took his money and dropped his investigation. You defended him through every scandal. You've made a career out of protecting him. Why would that change now? I am committed to independent law enforcement. No, you're not. You're committed to Donald Trump. That's why you're here. That's why he nominated you. Not because you're qualified. Not because you have integrity, but because you've proven over and over again that you'll protect him no matter what. Bondi's voice cracked. That is not true. Then prove it right now. Say you'll prosecute him if he breaks the law. Bondi stared at the table. Her hands were shaking. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. I would handle any case involving the president with the utmost care. And you still can't say it. The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved. No one breathed. Crockett closed her folder slowly. I have one more question, Attorney General Bondi. Bondi looked up, her eyes wet. When you took the oath as Florida Attorney General, you swore to uphold the law without fear or favor, to treat all people equally under the law, to seek justice, not to serve powerful men. Do you remember that oath? Yes. Did you mean it? Bondi's mouth opened. No sound came out. Did you mean it when you swore that oath? Or was it just words? Just something you had to say to get the job? Bondi's face crumpled. I meant it when I said it. But not after. Not when Trump donated to your campaign. Not when your donors needed help. Not when there was money to be made as a lobbyist. I always tried to do the right thing. The right thing for who? For yourself, for your career, for Donald Trump. Because it certainly wasn't for the people of Florida. It wasn't for the students defrauded by Trump University. It wasn't for the families you kept apart with harsh drug enforcement. It wasn't for justice. Bondi was crying now, tears streaming down her carefully made-up face. I did my best. Your best was selling your office to the highest bidder. Your best was protecting the powerful and prosecuting the powerless. Your best was turning justice into a commodity. Crockett's voice was cold now. And now you want to do it on a national scale. She stood up. I have no further questions for this nominee. The room stayed frozen for a long moment. Chairman Durbin cleared his throat. Does anyone else wish to question? I have a question. Senator Graham's voice cut through the silence. But when Bondi looked at him hopefully, his face was grim. Actually, no. I withdraw. I have no questions. One by one, the other senators declined. No one wanted to follow that. Bondi sat alone at the witness table, mascara running, hands shaking. She looked like someone who just watched their entire career end in real time. Because she had. That night, the clips would go viral. All of them. The timeline, the email, the wedding, the question about prosecution, but especially the final moment, Bondi crying, unable to answer the simplest question about integrity. Did you mean it when you swore that oath? The silence that followed would be played on every news channel, analyzed on every podcast, turned into a meme, a symbol, a moment. Some said Crockett had been too harsh. Others said she'd been too kind. But everyone agreed on one thing. Pam Bondi had walked into that hearing room as Attorney General nominee. She'd walked out as something else entirely, a person who couldn't answer whether she'd ever meant her oath, who couldn't say she'd prosecute a president who broke the law, who couldn't defend a career built on selective justice and pay-to-play politics. The vote on her confirmation would come later, but everyone already knew the outcome. You can't confirm someone who can't answer basic questions about integrity. You can't trust someone with justice who's already sold it once. You can't make someone Attorney General when their main qualification is loyalty to the person they might need to investigate. Crockett gathered her papers and left the hearing room. She didn't smile, didn't celebrate, just walked out. Behind her, Bondi sat frozen, still unable to answer the question that mattered most. Did you mean it? The silence said everything. When justice is for sale, what happens when someone finally asks the price? When loyalty trumps law, what happens when someone demands to know whose law you'll enforce? When a career is built on protecting the powerful, what happens when someone asks you to protect everyone? We just found out. And the answer is silence.